Can you give us some examples of how medical records may have made a difference in your trials?
Well, when people are injured, oftentimes the medical records are you have to get them right away, right? And so when a person comes into my office, first thing is list all your medical doctors. Then I'll send a follow-up email. Here's who we have for your medical doctors, or have my staff send it one way or the other. Have them write down on a piece of paper so that my staff can immediately get out those HIPAA release forms along with request for medical information, because as you know, sometimes it takes a while to get those medical records into your office. So that's the first step. And then you really need to have a system where, it's kind of a little bit of a triage system in my office. I have a paralegal team. Sometimes I'll have the paralegals review them. If the records are very, very voluminous, then you've got to turn to someone like yourself, right? A nurse consultant to review those records and kind of synthesize them. Very important to speak with your nurse consultant. Let them know what you're looking for. Let them know what the case is about, the points of emphasis. And there are times when you really, in order to prove liability, you need an expert right away. A wrongful death case, the cause of death. I mean, we handle cases, so often. Look at the George Floyd case that I followed very closely, where, you have someone who is ingested drugs, ingested fentanyl, killed Michael Jackson, killed Prince. The case is in Minnesota. Well, if he's ingesting fentanyl, was he the cause of his death? Well, of course not, when you had an officer with the knee on the neck for 9 minutes. But often cases are not that clear, right? It's just we had a similar case here in Los Angeles, where the time on the neck, the officer said that he did a chokehold for less than 10 seconds. Now, I think it was a little longer than that. But we were able to prove through the use of experts in the medical records that no, the cause of the death was cutting off oxygen and not, unfortunately, the drugs that this man had ingested. But there is a whole nother aspect to my practice, and that is we sometimes represent doctors. We represent nurses. We represent phlebotomists. Had a race discrimination case on behalf of an African-American phlebotomist that went to trial 2 years ago. Well, when I got the emails in that case with her coworkers complaining about her, I was like, they were complaining that she was a threat to patient safety. That's not a good thing, as you know, right? If your client is a threat to patient safety. But we were able to prove that she was actually being harassed. And that part of that harassment was loading her up with blood draws so that she had more than she could handle, calling her on the phone, where are you? Where are you? Well, guess what? You can't answer the phone when you're drawing blood, right?
No,
and they say, well, she's not answering the phone. And so by really digging, we were able to prove that it was the harassment. But what did we have to do? Now, of course, here you have the challenge where it's third-party medical records that are relevant. There were no doctor complaints. There were no nurses' complaints. There were no patient complaints about our client. It's just these coworkers who were not Black and had it in for her and said some things behind her back. So what we did was we had to request all of the blood draw records to show that what she was telling us was true, that she was being given more blood draws and doing more blood draws than any other phlebotomists. Well, of course, you get all types of objections on that. So as an attorney, it's very important objections, because those patients whose blood is being drawn have privacy rights, right? So, but as an attorney, we don't need the names. We don't need to know who those people are. We're just looking for numbers, right?
Yeah.
Well, we get the medical records back, the blood draw records back, and they black out everyone's name so that we can't see who's who, just our clients. So how can we do the comparative? Yeah. So we had to go in again and get the judge to say, unredact those names. And we were able to put together a very nice graphic for closing argument, showing the jury that indeed what our client said was true, that the African-American phlebotomists were given more work, and that the complaints about them weren't true. Because if my client's shirking her work, well, how is she drawing more blood than anybody else in her shift? She was a good employee and a good person. And so that's an example of where you can use medical records, even if you don't have the actual records, to win a trial. And the jury saw through this. awarded a nice verdict. It was about a $1.6 million verdict on her behalf because of the harassment she faced at work. And it was a way for us to use the medical records to achieve justice in an unconventional way in that situation.